Data collection and analysis are often integral to the process of research, including social science research. What is data? And what are the different types of data that we use or that we need to use in social science research? These are questions that we will briefly respond to. First, what is data? Generally, data refers to the factual, quantitative, or qualitative information that is systematically gathered and analyzed in order to answer our research questions, to test our research hypotheses, and to assess the outcomes of certain processes. Generally, in social sciences, data include things such as the demographic statistics, the numbers, quantities, survey responses, interview transcripts, and observations that help analyze societal patterns or social phenomena, and particularly human behavior in its various forms. Generally, data could be in textual form, or it could be in audio and visual form, or it could be in both forms. Now, first we will discuss what is qualitative data. So there are several types of data. We begin with qualitative data. What is qualitative data? Generally, as the very name suggests, qualitative data is not in numbers or quantities. We can say that qualitative data is non-numerical. It is descriptive data that generally captures experiences, perceptions, or meanings. Examples of qualitative data includes data in the form of opinions or in the form of behaviors, human behaviors, motivations, narratives, interviews, people's interviews, and observations. What is the purpose of qualitative data? Qualitative data is generally used to understand deeper insights, contexts, or meanings behind social phenomena, behind human phenomena. Suitable or generally useful data collection methods in terms of collecting qualitative data in social sciences include interviews. Interviews could be structured, not entirely structured, but they might have some structure. They could be semi-structured, or they could be unstructured. And I have lectures on all of these available in this space. The other form of data collection method is focus groups, which is a form of group interview or interview with a group of people on a particular issue. Then observations is an important data collection tool in qualitative research, where phenomena are observed in their natural settings generally. Case studies is basically data collection method, but it is also a research method where in-depth examinations of individuals or groups are conducted, and open-ended surveys, surveys that are not close-ended. They do not have specific answers, but rather they are open. These are some of the ways in which some of the forms of data collection or some of the methods of data collection in qualitative research. Now we move on to quantitative data. Generally, as the name suggests, quantitative data is basically numerical data or data in numbers, and we make use of quantitative data for statistical analysis. So generally it is in statistical form. Examples include test scores, income levels, population statistics, survey ratings, and other such things that involve numerical data. What is the purpose of quantitative data? Generally, quantitative research that involves the collection and analysis of quantitative data aim at testing hypotheses, measures variables, establish trends, and quantitative data is also used to analyze relationships or to find relationships or to establish relationships. Generally, the most suitable data collection methods in quantitative include survey questionnaires or questionnaires that are basically close-ended or Likert scale-based questions. Similarly, experiments, conducting experiments to test cause and effect relationships will also involve use and analysis of quantitative data. And then secondary data analysis, in some cases we already have data sets, such as for example census data or examination result data or institutional reports. So that's secondary data that we have not collected for our particular research, but we can do analysis of that. So that's quantitative data. And similarly, observations that are quantity based or quantitative observations, where we are actually counting the number of times a particular behavior, for example, is repeated, or the number of people performing an activity. So observations with counting could also be included in the quantitative data collection list. Now, there is another classification of data, that is, for example, what is primary data, what is secondary data. So primary data generally is data that a researcher collects firsthand for a specific study. So the data is not already available. The researcher is collecting this data for the first time for the very research that they are conducting. And examples of this include survey responses or interviews or experimental data. The purpose of primary data is basically to address specific research questions that you are exploring for the first time. The suitable data collection methods for primary data include survey questionnaires to gather direct responses, or interviews where we get in-depth first-hand accounts or perceptions, experiments that have been devised for the particular research study, where we need to test specific hypotheses, observations to gather first-hand behavioral data. So these are some of the ways in which we can collect primary data. Now, secondary data is you can say the opposite of primary data. What happens in secondary data is basically that secondary data is data that the researchers have not collected for their research that they are conducting. Someone else have generally collected this data already, and maybe for another purpose or for another research, but that data could be used for the research or the study that the current researchers are conducting. So for example, government reports, census data, institutional records, these are data that might have been collected by someone else, but you can make use of that data in your research, and in that case that will become secondary data. The purpose is basically to save time, or in some cases you might not have the resources to collect that kind of data or that level of data or data on that scale. So you already have that data available, and so you are making use of, so you can say convenience is also involved. It saves time and it saves you resources. Plus these are helpful because of the accuracy of the data. So now, what are the suitable data collection methods? Generally, secondary data analysis use publicly available or institutional data sets, and content analysis of written, visual, or recorded materials could also be included or termed as secondary data analysis. Now we move on to one more classification of data that is related to the collection of data in terms of time or duration. So generally, data collected at a single point in time is called cross-sectional data. And so you collect this data from multiple subjects generally or multiple sources, but at a single point of time. Generally, the examples of this include a survey about, for example, current attitude towards social media, or maybe data related to the evaluation of an examination system or an education system at a particular time. The purpose is to understand a snapshot of phenomena at a specific time, so you are not collecting data over extended period of time or over intervals, but on a specific time. Generally, suitable data collection methods for cross-sectional data include surveys for large populations, such as the use of questionnaires or scales at a single point, or interviews or focus groups for immediate feedback, and observations for real-time data collection. Now, the last, although there are other types of data as well, the focus of this lecture ends here. The longitudinal data. What is longitudinal data? As the very name suggests, this is data that we collect over time to track changes or trends. So how something has changed over a period of time, or what is the impact of some experiment, for example, or some experience over a period of time. That is something where we need longitudinal data, and so this type of data is collected over a period of time. Examples include tracking student progress, for example, over years, or for example over a period of 5 years, whether they have made progress or whether they have not made progress. Similarly, purpose, the study changes, causality, or development over time. So we need to study what changes have taken place, what are the longer term causes of something, what development has taken over a period of time. This is something that we study when we are collecting longitudinal data. Suitable data collection methods include repeated surveys or questionnaires. So you conduct a survey in the beginning, then maybe in the middle of the phenomena, and then towards the end. Or you may collect data through questionnaires several times over a period of time and over intervals. Similarly, panel studies where the same subjects are tracked over time, what changes have taken place in the behavior or in the performance of, let's say, students or employees. Observations over extended period of time, so you are not observing once or twice, but you are observing something repeatedly over a period of time, for example, over a year. And lastly, secondary data analysis using longitudinal data sets. So if you are making use of secondary data in longitudinal studies, you analyze secondary data using longitudinal data sets. That actually means data sets or data that have been collected previously by other researchers for other purposes over a longer period of time, and not at a particular point in